Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here's your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Heal, Thrive, Dream. Today, our guest is Susan Gold, who I already know is amazing. And she and I talked a little bit before recording, and we're a little bit scattered. So she's going to settle us in here in a minute with some magic. I am going to read a short bio for her, and she will also add to her bio during various points in the podcast. So if you're out there listening, thank you for joining us today. Susan Gold is navigating a ferociously challenging upbringing while bravely moving forward as an adult to face ingrained, outdated, and patriarchal programming head on. That was a mouthful, but wonderful. Susan now shares a unique perspective in viewing life challenges as occasions for transformation. She's excited to help others all over the globe transform their traumatic experiences into peace. That is so beautiful. We have a similar mission. So welcome, Susan. What are you going to do to settle us in today?
Wow. I was all over the map. It was a beautiful sky. And then they started spraying all over the place up in the sky. Just like, oh, come on, really. So let's just take a deep breath in and out. And then I'm going to take my hand and find my solar plexus, which is at the top of the rib cage and below the breastbone. And that's where I hold all my anxiety. Not all of it, but a lot of it goes in there. So just hand on the solar plexus. Take another breath in on your own time. Let it go. And then say either internally or out loud, I'm okay.
I am okay.
I am okay.
I am okay.
I am okay. And I don't know about you, Karen, but I feel so much better. I feel like my feet are finally on the ground, and that hamster wheel is at least a notch or two lower. And I just love that technique. I taught it to my son when he was in high school and going through all that hormones bring. And so before I dropped him off, I said, try this today. Nobody will know. And it's just so transformational. The simple things, right?
Mm-hmm. It is. And guess what? They don't cost anything. The sun, looking at the sun and the leaves on the tree, they don't cost anything. And it's just wonderful to be able to center ourselves in that way. So no matter where your income is right now, listeners, there are things that you can do for yourself, for self-care, that are healing. There are a lot of things you can do that are healing. So Susan, what in your bio did I not share that you think is super important that our listeners know about you today?
No, it's not super important, but
I think so. I think so, Susan.
I was an endurance athlete. I placed third in the Escape from Alcatraz triathlon. I then decided I wanted a master's swimming ranking, so I trained with former Olympians and world class athletes and got a national ranking in 4 years. I convinced Andy Warhol to do a commercial he didn't want to do. I got Taylor Swift and David Beckham and Jack Black to be interviewed by cartoon characters. I've had a really interesting and lush life. And I've had the opportunity to explore it deeply because I come from trauma, and that has walked alongside me this whole time. I've been on earth, but I've been lucky, like you were saying earlier, to find modalities of healing. And I'm so grateful to be with you and your viewers. And I'm so appreciative of this platform. I understand it takes time and devotion and effort and energy to have the guests you've had and to explore with them how they heal, thrive, and dream. And I'm just grateful to be here with you today, Karen. Thank you.
And I'm grateful to have you. And that list you shared, such little things. Poor you. Those achievements, they're so little. No. Thank you for letting me joke with you. No, I was reading some reviews about you and people were like, she's just amazing. And I get to see it now. So that's pretty cool for me. Okay. So now that we've done a little breathing and we feel more centered, what about your past trauma are you comfortable sharing with our guests today? And it doesn't have to be super detailed, but how can our survivors listening connect to you? How can you show them that you get what they might be thinking and feeling or experiencing?
Well, first of all, you're not alone. I want you to know that. So I grew up in a family of 5 children with 2 pseudo adults doing the best they could at the helm. It was hurt and abused children, raising hurt and abused children. And it goes back through the family lineage. My father's a genius astrophysicist, but the whiskey bottle used to uncork at 7:30 a.m. and you'd hear glug, 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 glug. And my mother soothed through food. She'd be eating out of the grocery bags as we came out of the store just to find some semblance of safety. And the answer to that back then were diet pills, which were speed. So I was being raised by an alcoholic who had a sexual addiction, and one whom I believe was a narcissist, in my own opinion. And my mother was a speed freak, unknown to her, I'm sure, and also, I believe, had a mental health issue. And she was saddled with 5 children before the age of 30, and her chance at an education never came, though she thought that was coming, and she felt put upon. And the earliest memory, Karen, I have was being 2 and feeling the playpen sponginess of that, mattress, that plastic mattress of the playpen underneath my heels. And I was grabbing hold of those wooden slats and wailing. I was in there way too long. I can feel wet. I can feel the tears and taste the salt. And then I was beaten rather than soothed. And that type of behavior was consistent through my upbringing. I had Oreos coming out my nose at 6 in the back of our station wagon after a visit to our grandparents in Ohio, just trying to find soothing and nurturing. I talked to my pets. I'd go out in the backyard and talk to the angels up in the clouds and ask them, why can't you beam me up there with you? Why am I here? Why am I experiencing this? And at the same time, Karen, there was love, there was excitement, there was joy, but just as quickly it could turn into terror and fear and beating and pain. So my upbringing was very confusing. Mm-hmm. And I always had that magic within me, that magical belief that no one could train out of me, and that feeling of joy that there was goodness and that I was lucky and that I would do something at some point with this life I was given. So I used to watch Barbara Walters when I was little on my beanbag on my belly in my basement.
It's so normal.
I want want to go to New York and I want to be like Barbara Walters. And I left my family home at 17. I left the morning after I graduated from high school, and I was terrified to leave after plotting and planning for so many years. And I eventually did make it to New York City. I was 19, living in Greenwich Village on an internship from college, and then ultimately went there upon graduation and got a job in a glitzy skyscraper. That's what I wanted in the entertainment industry, but it wasn't enough to pay my rent. So I started training people on the side, and Barbara Walters became one of my clients.
No way.
How's that for manifesting, Karen?
You're really good at it. I might need a tip or two or three from you.
She was a girl's girl. She would have loved you. Totally.
Yeah.
So one morning I rang her bell at 7 a.m. and she answered, and she's like, Susan, get in here. What's going on? Like, she was such an intuitive. She was a great interviewer for a reason. She could just hone right in. And she got it out of me. I had been sexually harassed in the workplace the day before. And she said, I am coming with you this morning, and we're going to confront this man together.
Wow. Is this in your book, by the way?
Oh, it's in the book and so much more.
Okay, good. Okay, but share with whatever you want about this story. It's great. I love it.
So I said, I really appreciate it, but I'm going to handle it. So I went in and I did confront my boss, who had chased me around the office the day before and tried to grab my anatomy. And he said, do you have everything you need? And I said, I do. And he said, you're fired. You can leave now. So I think I had 2.5 months of savings in the bank. I had just gotten sober. I realized, like my father, I too had an issue with alcohol. And I had just extricated myself from an abusive relationship where the man held the purse strings, which I'm ashamed to say was one of the reasons I was in that relationship. And I was terrified I would go back. So I was very determined. And I was led once again, led to knock on the door of the factory and convince Andy Warhol to do a commercial for Pontiac that he didn't want to do. And that's really what launched my career and being known for attaching celebrities to projects, and led me into producing and led me into a really fruitful career that, as I look back on now, was really of great fortune and synchronicity. But it also led me to unveil more of the past trauma that I had walked through and I still was holding in the cells of my being.
Yeah. I don't even know what to ask you next, because some of the things you say, I just was not expecting. Like the whole Barbara Walters story. Wow. That is so cool. I don't know what you think of this, but I did manifest my husband after kissing a lot of frogs. Well, first it was trial and error, and then I got really clear about what kind of person I needed in my life, or wanted in my life might be a better way to say it. And so I just got crystal clear on what kind of character they had to have. And ta-da, he showed up on Match.com. Like something like 98% match. And we've been together ever since.
I love that story.
Mm-hmm.
And especially after knowing what I know about your background, because our backgrounds echo each other in certain regards. And I just love that you found that on Match.com. You're brave.
That's one way to say it. But I mean, I'm not going to say that I manifested right out of the gate. I did manifest getting a master's in social work and being a healer and helper of many. I did manifest that. But the relationship thing is where my trauma really showed up for a long time. And so, I didn't meet him until I was 39, and we manifested Gideon, and I had Gideon at 40. So I already had two other children, one from a past marriage, Lena, who is supposed to be here. So that was supposed to happen. And Grace, I adopted when I worked overseas with the Marines. I adopted her from a young Marine who was not able to parent at the time. So I'm blessed too. So thank you for reminding me of that.
So exquisite. And it's amazing that we can walk this journey and have the abuse we have and still parent. I wasn't sure that I could. And I waited a long time. I would look at dogs on the street, not babies in carriages. And in my family, though, there's 5 children. There are 2 blood grandchildren. So we got the message very early on that children messed up things, that they were a lot of work and difficult. And I was afraid I would abuse my son, like I had been abused and saw demonstrated. So I held off. And then I was invited to LA for what I thought was a career opportunity, but really it was to meet one of my greatest gurus. And that would be the man who would ultimately become my ex-husband. But he really he would have had a gaggle of kids, and it was a deal breaker. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll miss something. And I'm so old, I'm sure it won't happen. Because most of my friends were, doing in vitro in their 30s. And here I was, how old was I? I was 42. So I thought, yeah, chances are really slim. But boy, that dipstick turned blue quick. And I was 43 when I had my son. Naturally, 10 hours door to door. And he too is meant to be here and also has been an incredible gift. And I can parent. As a result of my experience, I can allow him to be his own individual, not an extension of my being, and to have his own path, his own experiences. I gave him as solid a platform as I knew how, and he's working his way through college on a 3-year plan versus the 4-year.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have no doubt that, we know that a lot of times when parents abuse is because they themselves have been abused. But we also know that there's a lot of us that see what happened to us as what not to do manual. Like, okay, my parents did X. I didn't like how I felt. I will not do that to my child. It's a great not to do manual a lot of times, So what do you think about that?
Well, absolutely. And I always dreamed of being an only child. So maybe that's why I only had one. So I could vicariously have that experience, right? But yeah, absolutely. But even so, Karen, I believe we each come in with our own sort of roadmap and path and experiences that we need for soul evolution. I see this planet we're on as a huge schoolroom, a huge classroom for learning. So ultimately, I didn't have control, even though I would give him everything that I thought any child would want and would have been my dream, and maybe mostly the antithesis of what I experienced. He could have been a drug addict, right? He could have been he could have been on the 5-year plan instead of the 3-year plan, or not gone to college at all. Who knows what his experience would have been. But I am grateful that I said yes to the opportunity, and it was obvious that it was to happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure he's a wonderful individual, and your parenting may have had something to do with it. Yeah. So thank you for sharing what you did about, your childhood. Tell me more about your healing journey. Like, what really stuck and was helpful to you?
So I was in my early 20s when the same types of behaviors started to come up in my own life that I swore I wouldn't become involved with, like abusive relationships and not being able to extricate myself, heavy drama, lying when it was just as easy to tell the truth. My goals were slipping. My friends were becoming more fair weather. So I knew these were red flags. And so I was strong enough to ask for help, which back then was a no-no. Like, you didn't go to someone and pay them money and tell them secrets that you had grown up with. And I was terrified the day that I went to my first therapist, and he suggested I go back into the home where I grew up and start sharing about what was happening there. I thought I was going to melt, but my life was completely out of control and completely unmanageable. He immediately started talking about alcoholism. Was there alcoholism in my family? How much did my father drink? Did I drink? I said, of course I drink, but I feel happy when I drink. And he said, well, for now, while you're in treatment, you're not going to drink. That'll be a mandate. And I want you to go to meetings to learn about your father's drinking problem, and then meetings that will teach you about the family dynamic when there's an addict in the household raising a family. And that was really the leveling of the playing field, my being sober. And then about 4.5 years later, I found myself in the middle of a business deal that was echoing my role growing up. One night I was sleeping. It was about 11:30. I was woken with my parents screaming outside my bedroom door. I was in the bottom bunk. My sister was in the top bunk. And I heard my mother pleading for her life. So I jumped out of bed and opened the door to see my father holding a knife above his head and my mother on her knees. And I just screamed, "Stop it." And I passed out. And that circumstance was replicated on a different format. There were no knives, there were no screaming, but I was in between two parties trying to broker a deal, bring them together. It was a huge event for a big corporate celebration, and I was handling all of the talent contracts. And I went into heavy PTSD, and I couldn't shake the past. And I couldn't tease out the strands for the present. And I was 4.5 years clean, and I was in therapy, and I was working all the tools, but I just fell into a huge clinical depression. I separated from self. My friends saw it, and they got me to a treatment center for codependency. It was attached to a hospital. And there they did blood work, and they saw I was like on empty when it came to serotonin, and they suggested medication. And I did not want to take that medication. I was sober. I didn't need any kind of medication. So they threatened to lock me in the psych ward if I didn't take the medication. And this replicated the messaging, part of the messaging I received from my mother. My mother used to beat me and tell me I was crazy and that I was going to end up in a psych ward. So here I was confronting that same thing at 29 years old. And I got down on my knees that night and I asked for a miracle, and I asked for guidance and direction. And the next morning, this 17-year-old heroin addict who was in the same treatment program I was in, and I passed each other in the hallway, and she said, if you didn't have the issue with alcoholism that you did, and you weren't a clean addict, and you came here for the reason you did, and they did testing and they told you can be helped with this medication based on your blood work, would you do it? And I was like, yeah, I would take it. It was a no-brainer. And that was such a gift. So for the next 10 years, I got to learn what clinical depression was. And I got to learn the steps. And I did use medication off and on for those 10 years until I learned the trigger points. And I learned some different modalities, including meditation and some somatic body work that helped. And I haven't needed that medication in decades, but I'm grateful for that experience.
Well, God is funny, like showing up in a younger heroin addict to give you some advice you needed in that moment is wow. Wow. That's incredible.
I
You
think it
never know.
happens. Yeah, it happens
Yeah.
all along our path. There's so many times. And, when I make my gratitude list, those things go down there. Like it's
Mhm.
just so many serendipitous occasions. And there are occasions when I could have easily departed, lifted off the planet for sure. But those kinds of circumstances arose. And that's the beauty of the journey, right? I mean, if we're willing to step up and embrace our challenges and our challengers, ultimately, there's so many miracles that come as a result. It's just really difficult waiting for them, right? I used to tell myself, just hold on for the miracle. Just hold on. And sometimes it would be,
that.
Yeah, it would be like, hold on for the next minute.
I got to write that down.
Hold on
Just
for the miracle.
Hold on for the miracle.
Yeah, it could be the tagline of Heal, Thrive, Dream, Karen.
But then I'd have to give you credit for that, right? I'm very big on giving credit where it's due. But
it's
yes,
not
I
my
love
own.
that. Wait, well, where did you get it? Spirit sent it to you?
Yeah, friends of friends, and all of the stuff that I've learned have been delivered from mentors, from teachers, from angels, from strangers. Yeah.
Okay, I got it now. So the tagline is just hold on to the miracle from Susan Gold, A.L. The life book that just people keep putting in their wisdom. So that's cool. Yeah. Well, where do we go next in this conversation? Like how, I know. I can answer my own questions usually if I give it space and time, right? So you are a survivor who, with treatment and healing, became a thriver. Now, and I know you've had this amazing career that many people dream of, but where are you now? And what does your path look like in helping other survivors? Or is that not something you do? No, you do, because it's in your bio. So say more about what you do to help survivors.
So it's been a long journey, and I've experienced all sorts of modalities and treatment to be where I am. But I did finally leave an urban setting. I lived in New York City and I lived in LA, and I didn't think I'd leave the sunny state of California, but that little intuitive voice that gets louder the more experience you have was, you need expansive space. You need nature. And I had a cabin in the Catskills when I lived in New York City. And I don't miss the city, but I miss that cabin in the woods so much. So I started looking around, and I went to West Virginia because I went to school near West Virginia for college. And then I had been flown there to Greenbrier County for a big junket for a Fox movie. And I always remembered it. I was like, I got to go check it out. And I really was hoping that would be it, Karen, but it just didn't pull at my heart. And that's new for me, fairly new. My heart was so layered in black soot that it's been a process to melt all that away and to start living from my heart. I really didn't have an understanding or experience. So West Virginia, it wasn't the energy that was right. And I had friends in Montana, and they said, come look. And I said, I'll come in mid-January because I don't want any illusions of the snowy, cold, icy weather. And I flew over the Flathead near Glacier National Park, and it was like Brigadoon or Camelot or Lost Horizon. It was so apparent. And I drove a ways and came up towards the Canadian border and found Nirvana. I live on the prairie. I'm surrounded by mountains. It's like Sedona before it got all commercialized. And it looks like the Nepali coast of Hawaii out my one window. It looks like the Swiss Alps out my back window. As a matter of fact, if anybody's seen this visually, This is the view out my back slider, but I can't shoot into
That's
it. There's too much. Yeah, there's too much backlight. I can't shoot it naturally. So I just put in all sorts of photos. And then out my front window, it looks like Tuscany. So it pays to follow. Yeah, it pays to follow that intuitive voice. Here I am in peace and quiet and expansion. I finished my book out here. It was published 2 months ago. It's really helping people. Thank you. I didn't think that I had a book to write, but yeah, Spirit said otherwise. So, and Toxic Family was not my title. It's my publisher's, but it is the truth of the book. And I didn't want to throw my family under the bus because I've come full circle and I praise the roles that they all played. And I have great respect for them and great love. And that's a whole journey of healing in and of itself. But the book is my personal and my professional trajectory. And I'm proud of it. But what I'm most excited about is the workbook and the appendix, because it's exercises that I've used to help me and I still use. I mean, even the first one that we opened with, that's in the appendix, and it's actually helping people. Like I teared up the other day on a podcast because the host shared how much she had been helped by one of the exercises, and I'm getting reviews from people I don't even know. So
beautiful.
I guess the universe is right. So I always direct people to the book first. And then if they need extra help or a cheat sheet, they come to me one-on-one, and I'm working on workshops and retreats, but that'll all come. So if people feel called, only if you feel called, I am not selling anything. Believe me, if I get one more email in my inbox from my new best friend who wants me to come to his or her webinar and then buy the course for a discounted $897 instead of $5,050, I think I'm going to puke. But so I'm not doing that. But it's all at SusanGold.us.
SusanGold.us. Okay, and for listeners who don't have the show notes yet, what is the title of your book, the full title?
Toxic Family, Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom.
Beautiful. And how did your family respond to your book?
So I had night terrors and sweats. They all have very different experiences of my upbringing. My oldest brother, who I had the most abuse with, is almost a total blackout of his childhood. My sister thinks she had an idyllic childhood. My two younger brothers are different as well. So my sister is saying bravo, congratulations. It's a taboo topic, and we all had our different experiences. My youngest brother is just reading the book now. And my mom and her father, who are in heaven, have already sent messages of "Go, girl, go." They're like happy to break the family dynamic and the toxicity. Yeah. So yeah, it's really been remarkable. And
that makes me want to cry. Woo, give me a second. Okay. Ooh, okay. I didn't schedule crying today, Susan.
But those are gratitude tears from the angels. Yes. Yeah, I can feel it.
You're right.
Yeah.
Well, what it was reminding me of is my mom passed away in January, and my grief has been complicated, but easier than I anticipated. And I decided that's because my mom's had such a hard life that I've been grieving her my whole life. So knowing that she's at peace has somehow helped or comforted me. But the Thursday before Mother's Day, I was getting really anxious about Mother's Day. I'm like, how am I going to feel? How am I going to do? And I just had this healing energy from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. And it lingered, and it was so peaceful that I was okay. I was like, At first I gave credit to God or higher power, but I know my mom had something to do with that too. So it was very comforting. And what you said kind of reminded me of that.
I am so glad, Karen, that you shared that. I didn't understand until my mom transitioned that we used to communicate telepathically forever. We were on opposite sides of the country, but I didn't know it until she was gone because I was doing the same thing after she passed. And I too have had incredible healing. And I too have experienced that feeling, that total soothing and all is well. And honestly, I think that's one of our natural states that sort of gets blocked out on our journey here. We kind of lose that along the pathway somewhere. And it's so beautiful when it comes in to remind us. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what's next for you, Susan? What's your next? What are you being called to do next?
Well, continue to walk the path that I'm on, and podcasts are the way that I'm communicating about my book, my experience, my messaging, to share it. And I had a podcast guest tell me that while my career was really stellar and awesome and exciting and successful, what I'm doing now is my mission to bring this taboo topic forward, to start this conversation, to open locked and secret doors. So that's what I'm doing, Karen. I'm just opening to all of this and surrendering and remaining humble and trusting. And the magic is continuing to happen. So I feel really fortunate, and I hope that somehow I can help others leapfrog, 4 lily pads forward.
Oh, that's the first time I've heard it like that. That's a different way than saying like quantum leaps, because maybe some of us need to do the leap pad approach. It feels more safe. Yeah. Okay, well, I don't know how I want to wrap up today. Maybe I should have just why do I have to have the last word? I got to stop that. Okay, so I want you to have the last word, and the prompt I want to give you, and I see you laughing at me, and it's all good. I laugh at myself too. There's someone listening today who's really meant to hear you, Susan. They picked today's episode out of all the episodes I have because they somehow resonate or get called to listen to you. What is the last thing you want to leave them with today? Like, picture this individual has really suffered and doesn't know what direction to do next. They just know they're craving some healing. What is the one piece of magic you could give them today? Boy, pressure. I'm so sorry. Not.
It's not pressure, because I got an instant message from that person's higher being. And the message for you is there's no mistake that you're here. And this is your team leading you forward. They are carrying you. They are all around you. And they are so proud of you. And they love you so much. They want you to know that you're worthy, that you have value, that you are supported, and you are loved. And you are brought to this particular podcast and this particular message for a reason. All is well, and you're safe.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.